Cool, cool. Good evening. I'm Brian Gerhards with the Des Moines IGDA chapter. We have a full evening tonight chatting with Airdorf Games. I'm actually really excited about this. A few months ago, something like that, reached out. Not sure if we're going to hear back, but you know what? We've got him here, so we heard back. So uh, just to give you a quick chat about who we are. Yes, we are your Des Moines chapter, Des Moines, Iowa. Not those other Des Moines, Des Moines, Iowa. We're the best, right? Um, we're part of the International Game Developers Association. Our goal is to support local game designers, developers, artists, anybody who wants to get into a career in gaming. We're here to help you. We're here to connect you with the people that you would like to be connected with. So reach out to one of us. Go take a look at our IGDA chapter page. Uh, go take a look at our Facebook page. Go take a look at our Twitter, which we'll get some content on there, I promise, someday. Join our Slack community. Join us on Discord. So we do have all of those links right here on this. We also do have it on the description on this video. So if you have any questions, again, reach out to one of us. So IGDA, again, being an organization that helps individuals get into the career of gaming. You can become a member today if you are interested. Reach out to us if you have questions. Reach out to us for anything. If you just want to chat, if you just want to.
I'm a member.
Airdorf is a member.
Yep.
IGDA, as part of an IGDA member, you do have access to an extensive resource library, special interest groups, lots of resources at your fingertips, a great community. And the slide tells everything basically. You don't have to join, but we would really appreciate if you want to join the Des Moines. One thing that it provides is, again, a little additional awareness of the IGDA community. So if you have any questions, feel free and reach out to us. Join our Slack channel. I'm just going to say that a million times. Join our Slack channel. So without further ado, we have Airdorf here. So if you're not familiar with him or the individuals behind the scenes, you're going to learn a lot today. I'm very interested in hearing what they've got to say. So I'm just going to go ahead and hand it over. So, hey, welcome.
Okay. Hey, Brian. It's good to be with y'all. Really excited to talk to y'all tonight. So I have some slides prepared. Oh, I'm Airdorf, by the way. I created Airdorf Games back in 2017 when I officially released Faith, and I got some slides prepared. They are adapted from my GDC talk, which were adapted from a talk I gave at Fantastic Arcade in Austin, Texas. And basically, we're going to talk about my games, obviously. We're going to talk about how kind of the development process of Faith and Faith Chapter 2 and 3, and also talk about kind of my journey into the world of indie horror gaming, some marketing strategies that I used that made me I don't know about successful, but kind of gave Faith the cult following that it has today, and also talk a little bit about what it's like working with my publisher, New Blood Interactive. So let's just jump right in. So y'all can see my slides, right? Um, okay, so here I am, Airdorf Games. This is my terrible logo that I hope to change one day, but here we are. So I'm responsible for these games. Faith came out in early October 2017. Chapter 2 about a year and a half later. Chapter 3 is currently in development. I do not have a release date for it, so don't ask. And then I also made titles like The Wind, which was kind of a flash game that was a tie-in for an indie horror movie by the same name. And then Extraordinary, which was very similar to The Wind in that it's also based on a movie. Earl's Day Off was part of the Fishing Game Jam this year, and then Summer Night was a short game that I released with in tandem with the Dread X collection, which is the third Dread X collection is about to be released. So, check that out. And these are some games that that are like close to my heart that I personally enjoy. So, Legend of Zelda: Link's Awakening was the very first game that I ever had for myself. My parents bought me a Game Boy It must have been 1994 or 5, and it came with Link's Awakening, and I played the crap out of that game. It took me like 6 years to beat, and it was probably the single most influential game in my life. And every game that I make has at least some reference to Link's Awakening. And then these are some other games that I find that I really enjoy and that are pretty influential on my own work. Yeah, so Faith, October 4th, 2017. So it, I started Faith because I wanted to make a horror game that I had this idea, this design challenge that I wanted to give myself to create a horror experience using just basic graphics. And this was around 2014 when I really started thinking about it. So that was when PT came out on PlayStation 4, PT being my all-time favorite horror game and is such a huge influential title like relative to my own work. Excuse me. And it got canceled by Konami. Screw them. I will never forgive them. And there were a lot of what I call PT-ware games that came out afterwards. So they were using indie devs were using like the Unreal Engine to make kind of these high fidelity PTS games. Layers of Fear is usually credited as the one that like made it through development hell and was actually like released. I happen to not think that Layers of Fear is like anything like PT, but that's okay. That's another discussion. But I wanted to make a game like that because PT was so impactful to myself as a player, but I didn't know how to do any graphics programming or anything like that, or how to work in Unreal. But I did know how to use Game Maker from a college course that I took about a year before, and so I just went to work on a game that it was basically supposed to be the hunting mini game from the Oregon Trail. For those of you who are, of the age group to know what game that is, and it had this kind of exorcism twist to it, and it started as that, and then it kind of turned into this story that I wanted to craft that was kind of based on it's absolutely based on the Satanic Panic of the 1980s, and also some thoughts that I have about like Christianity and religion and the struggles I guess associated with it, issues associated with. And I just released it on itch.io. I was really interested in these free to use digital marketplaces and on itch.io, and I got my first sale. I did Pay What You Want, and 3 years later, here I am. People have made like lore videos. Someone wrote a song about faith, like, and made a music video and like put it up on YouTube. And I think that by now, like, the game is pretty meme worthy. Like the whole Mortis thing kind of took off and became a thing. And I honestly never thought that I would be in this place. Now I have something like 24,000 followers. I call them friends, but they're also followers on Twitter that are constantly asking me how the game is going and when it's going to be released and stuff. And I never thought that I would have this life as an indie game developer. So, and then of course, February 2019 was Chapter 2, and then Faith Chapter 3 is still being worked on. Please be patient with me. So in 2017, around October, there was a listicle that came out on IGN. It was the top, I forget how many, top 18 horror games of 2017. And Faith was on the list. It was on the list next to, or like included with, Resident Evil 7, which I really like, and other games like Senua's Sacrifice, The Evil Within 2. And so here's a character from Resident Evil 7, and then here's a character from my game over here on the right. So how did this chunk of pixels become become a part of this list? How did it become what it is today, and how did it kind of become this cult classic of a horror game? Which sounds so weird to talk about my own game like that. I really don't see myself as this, like, the game as a cult classic or anything, or me as like anything more than just a hobbyist game dev, but it is what it is. So we're going to talk about my approach to Faith, hopefully the constraints that I embraced, the techniques that I used, and the types of marketing activities that I used. hopefully learning about that will help you all if you're an indie game creator like myself, or you're wanting to get into indie game dev. Maybe this will inspire you. What I'm going to talk about worked for me in a certain time of my life, in according to certain people who saw it at certain times. So I'm not saying that these are like the foolproof ways of indie success. I think the term success in indie gaming is very broad. Is very subjective. So I'm just going to talk about what worked for me. Hopefully, it can be inspiring. So the first time I ever got scared playing a video game was playing Doom at a friend's house, and down this long hallway in the Doom level was an imp, and the imp was slowly, doing his imp walk towards us and throwing fireballs. And even though he was just a chunk of pixels, it scared the crap out of me because it was the first time I felt this fear that something was going to get me in a game. And that was a really defining moment for me. And it got me interested in horror and kind of the emotions that horror games can elicit. And so when I first started Faith, I looked a lot at found footage horror films, which are kind of a weakness of mine. I love the Blair Witch Project. Paranormal Activity 3 is one of my all-time favorite horror films. There's the scene in the Blair Witch Project where they're in a tent at night and they're listening to sounds outside of their tent, and something starts pounding on the tent, and so they all get freaked out and they leave the tent, they start running, and the camera is being held by a character, and while she's running, and you don't see anything, but she reacts to something off screen. She says, oh my god, what the f is that? And in real life, while they were filming that, she was actually looking at a crew member who had a bed sheet over them and a Halloween mask. So if the camera actually showed that, it really wouldn't be as scary as the implied horror off screen. And so that became one of my design mottos for Faith. This, oh my god, what the f is that? And it happens to work really well with pixel art. But first, I also had some other, um, having studied fine art and architecture and art history a little bit in college, I was really fascinated with like Francisco de Goya, who's here on the bottom. He has his whole black painting series, and I was really inspired by the way that these horrific images kind of creep out of the darkness, and they almost all have this kind of black background, and the characters and the forms, they just kind of emerge out of the darkness. And then there's Christina's World. I think this is Andrew Wyeth, which is this kind of a hyper real depiction of isolation and danger. And I wanted to kind of give that vibe. And of course, Junji Ito, you can't not mention the legend himself when talking about like freaky imagery in games. He's so prolific, and I believe he was involved creatively with PG along with Guillermo del Toro. And then there's the 80s. So in the Satanic Scare was a period in the 80s where there was a lot of paranoia and mistrust towards aspects of the society that were kind of emerging, like heavy metal and rock music. Dungeons and Dragons was a big deal, was a big target. Um, drug use, of course. Drugs are always bad. It wasn't part of the panic, but it was a part of it. And I I kind of had this. So I was born in 1988, so I did 2 years in the 80s. So I have a little bit of authority when I speak to this. But there was a dark side to the 1980s that I wanted to tap into. So I rejected the blue and pink neon aesthetic that we see in like the retro wave and the synth wave, scene. And I kind of didn't want to do anything like that. I didn't want any DeLoreans, so I just focused on like sedans from that age. Everyone wore clothes from the 70s because they weren't quite fashionable, fashion forward in the 80s. So I imagine this family that built a house in the middle of nowhere during this decade of excess where people built huge houses and stuff like that. And in the 80s, like I said, there's this kind of, it wasn't always this rose-tinted nostalgia that we associate with the 80s. There were no cell phones, there was no GPS, there was no internet. So if you were on the road and your car broke down, you had to hope that you knew how to change a tire, or you had to wave someone down, which could be anyone, or you had to walk to the next gas station. There was this sense of isolation and disconnection that we don't have anymore. And I wanted to kind of tap into that feeling with this Satanic Scare. This was a big part of Faith's design. Negative space. So the pixel art in Faith is engineered specifically to be abstract enough to have that retro aesthetic, but also readable enough for the player to recognize what they're seeing. And so I had this pledge that I tend to not have more than 2, maybe 3 colors in a sprite, and I try to have specific color themes. And if I can accomplish a shape or a form using just negative space, meaning I cut out pixels rather than add a different colored pixel, then that will um, be what I want. So this was one of the very first sprites that I made for Faith, the house, the Martin family house. And here you can see how I kind of crafted the negative space to give the impression that it's this like scary house. Negative space from a formal standpoint is also really important with things like spatial cognition, which is something that I studied for a while, which is how we have these cognitive patterns of how things should be arranged to give certain navigational impressions and certain spatial profession kind of impressions. So I formed the woods area with these kind of gaps in the. I'm pointing to my screen like y'all can see it, but y'all can't. I don't know if y'all can see my mouse cursor. Okay, you can see my mouse cursor. Okay, so I crafted these screens that kind of randomly appear in the forest, and there are these negative spaces in the hopes that the player would see them as spatial cues, and that they would navigate the woods a certain way, and it gives the illusion, or it lies to them that this is a forest that is navigable, not kind of pseudo randomized like I actually developed it. So the theme of getting lost in the woods is kind of supported by how I arrange those screens. And then over here on the right with the mannequins, this was a scare that I designed specifically so that Markiplier would play it and get scared by the mannequins. True story. And he eventually played it, which was really cool. And just having this tension between, the player starts over on this side and has to walk down here to get to the next screen, but they have to walk past all the mannequins that are mysteriously congregated on this side. And for anyone who's played the game, the scare is not what you think it is. And so um, using that negative space to my advantage to create this tension was kind of a big deal for me. And then let's move to the star of the show, the rotoscoped cutscenes. So I didn't always do this. I should have included the original screens, but when Michael Davies shows up on the screen, it originally wasn't this rotoscoped animation. It was just a flashing image of him close up that was supposed to be really creepy. But I wanted to take it a step further and do something along the lines of this quote here. So this is a critic's accolade that was in the trailer for The Witch, which is another horror film that I really enjoy and was a big. The Witch has been a big inspiration for the Faith series. And it says it feels like we're watching something we should not be seeing. And that was kind of like my motto that I wanted to attach, that like the emotional impact that I wanted to attach to these rotoscope cutscenes. So Faith mimics kind of the MS-DOS era, the 8-bit era of classic gaming. So something you would see on the Atari 2600 or the ZX Spectrum or on MS-DOS. And then the uncanniness is seeing this, very smoothly animated. They're actually not smoothly animated. They're actually 15. They're actually running at 15 frames per second, like the rest of the game. But your mind fills in the gaps, which is another thing. I wanted to keep the game relatively obscure and mysterious, so that your imagination, as the player, kind of filled in the gaps with your own fears. And I think it worked in a lot of instances. But yeah, a lot of people ask how I accomplish these cutscenes, so I'll show y'all. So over here on the left is yours truly acting out the peekaboo demon here on the right. I really enjoy this demon design a lot. And so what I do is I film myself doing these. So I have a little bit of stage acting experience. And so I kind of think of what I want to do. I kind of plan it out. And I was also trained as an animator in university. Um, I've done animation classes with like Disney animators and stuff, and I have a pretty strong background in it. And the rotoscoping technique was always kind of a little freaky to me. So like Ralph Bakshi, who did that old Lord of the Rings cartoon in the 60s or 70s, and to some extent the Disney artists, they used rotoscoping. So they would film a live actor acting out a scene, and then they would literally trace over it with a few like creative liberties taken. And it's a legitimate but very cheap and very unsettling uh, method for animating characters because they're so lifelike that there's this uncanny valley effect. So I wanted to tap into all of that. I wanted that to be in the game. And so what I do is I go out and I film myself, and then I export the frames, or I import the frames into Photoshop, and then using the timeline, using the timeline feature and my new drawing tablet that uh, fans of the game helped me pay for, which was a huge deal. Using previously, I used a mouse, so I would hand draw with the mouse, frame by frame at 15 frames per second, sometimes 6 seconds long. So you do the math. That's sometimes 90 frames. I would do that frame by frame using just the mouse, and it would kill my wrist at the end of the day, and it took all day. So now that I have the artist tablet and I can draw more naturally with my hand, um, and with my arm, uh, it takes like a couple hours instead of a full day. And so I'm really thankful for that, and really thankful that I got help paying for that tablet. It was a huge deal to me. And so oh yeah, so Karen's saying that she's glad that she's not the only one who uses Photoshop for animation. So I use Photoshop for animation. There is a utility that you can get for free called Paint of Persia, which basically is MS Paint, but it's a transparent window, so you can do frame by frame like rotoscoped animation, because Prince of Persia was rotoscoped animation. So here's another one. So here's me in a blanket and a Texas apron filming Miriam Bell, who was the final boss of chapter 2. So you can see how I take a lot of creative liberties in addition to what you see on camera. So the most difficult rotoscoped animation that I did was the hand scene, the hand coming out of the face of Amy Martin, the final boss of the first chapter. So I had to film myself acting as if a hand was erupting out of a bloody gaping hole in my face. Then I had to act out the hand part, and then I had to go frame by frame and superimpose the hand onto the face, and it worked out. And I had to kind of draw the seams of it, coming out and stuff, and like the blood splattering and stuff. Um, and so these are the steps that I take to get those animated cutscenes accomplished. So okay, so Karen is asking for an FMV game version using these clips. So this is actually something we have we have discussed with my publisher. Anyone who knows Dave Oshry over at New Blood Games, he's always got great ideas, and so maybe it'll be like a special feature where it replaces all the rotoscope scenes with me in an apron in my kitchen walking around. So anyway, so chapter 1, that was kind of my mindset with chapter 1. And chapter 2, obviously it's a sequel along the same lines of the series. I didn't want to do anything that departed too much from the first game. And chapter 2 was very interesting. I started by reading H.P. Lovecraft. So I wanted this game to have kind of a different feel and a different structure from chapter 1. So I started with reading a lot of Lovecraft. I'd never read him before. It was very interesting. And I wanted it to be structured as this kind of haunted house that you were walking through instead of this woods area that you got lost in. So a little less open-ended, but still has this kind of structure. And I was inspired mostly by The Evil Within, which has this really interesting it kind of jumps to different locales, and and it's a little more sequential. So I took a lot of inspiration from The Evil Within and H.P. Lovecraft. As you can see, the Unspeakable is a demon that is very Lovecraft inspired, and they make an appearance, and kind of that whole lore starts in chapter 2. With chapter 2, I was really afraid. So after the relative success of Faith and having it kind of go a little bit viral with, being picked up on those IGN articles and being streamed by Vinny at Vinesauce, that was a huge deal. And others, like, I felt the pressure to not fall for like the sequelitis. I didn't want Faith Chapter 2 to be in another one of Ego Raptor's sequelitis videos. Not that he would ever play Faith or whatever, but I didn't want to fall victim to, you know, you know, just more of the same to where the player got bored, or departing from the source material like Disney does with their animated sequels to where it's not even recognizable or whatever, or likable. I liked Rescuers Down Under though. That was probably a good sequel. And throughout the whole development process of Chapter 2, I was really afraid that it it would fall flat, or that it wouldn't be scary. Like, my biggest fear with these games is that it's not scaring the hell out of y'all. And I was really afraid of that, but so far the consensus is that chapter 2 is just as good as chapter 1. Obviously, people have their favorite chapters and stuff, but I happen to really like how chapter 2 turned out. And so and seeing the reception for chapter 2 really boosted my confidence and helped me kind of pull through to chapter 3, which I started development on in the springtime last year. I wanted to get a demo out with New Blood after we made a publishing agreement, and it is currently being worked on. So chapter 3 is, full disclosure, like, this game is killing me. um, I am trying to create the absolute scariest game that I can, and that takes a lot of time and energy. It takes a lot of like sitting back and really looking at what I'm developing, and um, kind of gauging against expectations, and in reactions to stuff that I post online. And so it's been a really interesting ride. I think I'm also afraid of what will happen when I finish the series. Like, I'm a little sad that I'm working on what will probably be the last installment in this part of the Faith series, like this, these main games. But some things that I'm doing differently in chapter 3 that you can look forward to is, um, The Ring is one of my favorite horror films of all time, probably my all-time favorite. And it has this time scale to it, like it's a race against time to kind of solve a mystery and get something done. Boy, my webcam is like freaking out. Um, and There we go. And so I kind of want to do the same thing with Faith Chapter 3. So there's not a time limit or a time penalty on the game, but there's this sense that John Ward and Father Garcia are working together and racing against the clock to stop something horrible from happening. And so you can expect more secret endings. You can expect there are like entire levels of this game that are secret that you have to work to find, basically. And there's going to be some really interesting things that we're going to do with the scares. Twitch integration, we're starting to do that. I don't know if any of y'all subscribe to my Twitch channel, but every now and then I'll do like a stress test for the Twitch chat integration where the Twitch chat can summon demons and raise hell for whatever streamer is playing the game. I really like that stuff. And um, with my new tablet, I can now make more and higher quality rotoscoped cutscenes um, than I was able to do before. And I hope that y'all enjoy it. I would say it's about 33% done right now. Unfortunately, Halloween is not going to be the release date for the game, but I'm working towards getting something out there for y'all on Halloween. So you can probably expect it. I don't know, maybe next year. I'm sorry, y'all, but I'm working as hard as I can. So anyway, I think chapter 3 will be really interesting because it will answer a lot of questions that players may be having about like the lore and like what's going on with Faith and what's going on with John Ward, with Gary, and some of the other characters. There will be a lot of questions answered about Amy Martin and John specifically in this game. So I've been enjoying working on it. Do I have a light? No. Oh, okay. I do not have a light on my desk, so I don't know. I think when I move, let me see if I can turn the light up a little bit. Sorry, y'all. Stand by. Is that a little better? Yeah, okay. Sorry, folks. So, as an indie game dev, and like I said, these are not like fail-proof techniques for super happy fun time indie game dev success, but this is just what worked for me in this stage of my life doing these things. So the fact that Faith is a very it's a very specific game and that it's kind of unique in that it endeavored to create a horror game using just basic graphics, like that worked for me. It wasn't, I know that if I had made a zombie survival game with crafting, it probably would not have gotten the attention it had gotten, or if I had made like a FNAF clone or something like that. I highly respect Five Nights at Freddy's, but part of the reason why I developed Faith was because I wanted to kind of see if I could disrupt the pattern of games that were very common back then. And then the fact that the game is is relatively short, you can play through it comfortably in an hour. There's speedrunners who've like beat it in like 4 minutes or something. And it's got this hook, right? So it's really easy to pitch Faith. It's a horror movie. It's a horror game with Atari graphics, and that makes it very like let's play friendly, which worked out for me. And focusing on smaller ponds instead of going straight into Steam, I think was a good move for me, because there's like high discoverability on itch.io relative to Steam, where smaller games can get buried really easily if you don't have a lot of funding for marketing, I guess. And Faith was made on a shoestring budget. Like it was made in the wee hours of the morning or late at night when I wasn't doing my undergrad or doing my day job. And I'm very thankful to have been featured on itch.io and GameJolt, and to be in a few bundles that helped boosted, my visibility. And after the first year and a half, I found myself being a kind of a big fish in a couple of small ponds, and eventually I wanted to move on to to bigger things. But focusing on those smaller venues was good for me. Oh yeah, pricing. So Faith is free, or it's pay what you want. If you pay $1, you get like the deluxe version, which is like gives you like the soundtrack and other things. But making it very accessible price wise was a good deal. What's interesting is that Faith Chapter 2 is $1 because I figured I could at least value myself at like $1. Definitely should have charged more for Faith than Faith Chapter 2, but if I had, maybe it wouldn't have gotten the exposure that it got initially. So Chapter 2 made more money in its first month. The revenue was more for Faith Chapter 2 in its first month than Faith made in its first year and a half. So, but Faith is more well known than Chapter 2. A lot of people don't know that there's a second part. So it was interesting. I made more money off of Chapter 2, but Faith will always top the charts like out of my games. And it will always be the most like recognizable YouTubers and streamers. So I was really lucky to have Vinny from Vinesauce play Faith relatively early, and his audience really took to it, and he really liked it. And nowadays I can just DM him when my next game's going to come out, and he'll usually play it around Halloween or something. And I'm really thankful for streamers like him who take a chance on the smaller games and smaller titles and stuff like that. That was kind of when Mortis kind of started becoming a meme, and I was really fortunate. Eventually, Markiplier, who I've been subbed to since 2011, since he started playing Amnesia, I've been subbed to him forever, and I really wanted him to play Faith. He's not very accessible when it comes to like getting him to play your game, so you kind of have to wait for him to find you. And eventually he played it, and that was like a huge deal for me. It was a huge spike in my my numbers on itch, and it kind of reset the long tail for me, and it was a huge deal. Jacksepticeye played it, and then a lot of smaller YouTubers like Gab Smolders, like John Wolf. He's not necessarily small, but um, they all played it, and I've been able to. And then Oni played it, and watching Psychic Pebbles play my game or watch Oni playing my game was like surreal. Was a very surreal experience, and all of a sudden, YouTubers and streamers that I admire are playing Faith, and um, it's been really kind of crazy. So I'm hoping to appeal to streamers even more by having this Twitch integration and kind of letting these streamers kind of rediscover it in the context of the Twitch chat integration, so that people in the chat can, you know, every time they spam Mortis in the chat, maybe something will happen in the game. So getting a publisher was a big step for me. I don't recommend a publisher for every game and every dev. I wouldn't have chosen New Blood Interactive if they weren't the best publisher that I could have asked for at this point in my career. They they're really cool. Dave Oshry, the CEO at New Blood, is a genius, and they've really helped me along, and they're very supportive, and they've been very patient with me. It's been a busy year. We had our first child back in May, and lots of big life events for me happened in 2020. Not to mention the general anxiety and depression that we all feel like in 2020, like just everything that's happened so far. So they've been very supportive of me, and they've been some of my biggest like supporters, and have really kind of pushed me along, or kind of helped me along really. But we'll talk about them in a little bit. So I was part of the last couple of Steam game festivals, and I actually got a developer spotlight in the last one. So that was a big deal for me. So wish listing the Faith Steam page, which is going to be the Unholy Trinity. It's going to be all 3 chapters all in one. The wish lists that I got were um, this virtual background is just giving me a rash. So I'm just going to make it my dark room. If Mrs. Airdorf walks in, I might stop the video for for privacy's sake, or I might switch to something else. But um, we got a lot of wish lists, and wish lists are not necessarily a good indication for sales, but they at least mean that someone's watching your game and paying attention. So Faith, the Unholy Trinity page on Steam, you can go there, go to GaryLovesYou.com. I'm going to put in the chat, GaryLovesYou.com. Gary is a normal human being. Oops, remove any web addresses and try again. Never mind. But anyway, so that's basically how we know that it's kind of there's some getting some eyes on it. So a few lucky breaks. So Vinny playing it was a big deal. It kind of put Faith on the map. I was on several listicles for IGN in 2017 that gave a lot of sent a lot of thanks y'all for putting in GaryLovesYou.com. On IGN, I was in a few lists that helped me gain a lot of exposure. This was not a lucky break that our dog got into a medical emergency, but it was a very lucky break that a fellow indie game dev, Puppet Combo, who's a good friend, he actually organized a benefit bundle so that we could pay for our dog's medical expenses or vet bills, and that got and I think Rock Paper Shotgun did an article on the bundle, and it was totally unplanned. It was all Puppet Combo's idea, and it was really touching to see like the indie horror community kind of come together and help us, and it was kind of a special thing, and so that got some more eyes on Faith. It's not necessarily a good thing that happened to our dog, but it was really sweet to see the community kind of come together and help us out. And then I was on the itch.io selects bundle, and I was featured on itch.io. So I recommend itch over GameJolt. GameJolt is a great platform, but in my experience, I got more lucky on I got lucky on itch with like sales and stuff than Game Jolt, and then IndieDB. Don't even waste your time with that. And then I was recently on a subreddit thread on about games that are scary despite their graphics style. And Faith came up and it got a lot of upvotes and it drove a lot of traffic to my itch page and hopefully to the Steam page. So the Steam game will, for an explanation, so you can still get Faith on itch.io and GameJolt, but the Steam Unholy Trinity version will be like an expanded version that will have like, you know, it'll have more features, it'll have more content, you know, DLC and stuff. It'll have the Twitch integration, the itch. The other platforms will not have this, and so if you want like the definitive edition of Faith, then definitely wishlist it on Steam. And you know, Markiplier playing it was a huge moment for me, and to see that he actually got scared of it and, you know, scared from it, and that the scares that I actually designed quite a bit of Faith with Markiplier in mind, being such a big fan of his and hoping that someday he would play it. I specifically designed parts of the game according to what, you know, how he's reacted in the past, and forming a game that was kind of tailored that way towards streamers and YouTubers really helped me out. So what hasn't worked, man, this is like we're having like camera woes right now. Where video settings, adjust for low light, auto, manual. Oh, now now we look like I'm on a webcam in like 2003. Okay. Maybe, I don't know. I'm sorry, y'all, if my webcam's not working. So what hasn't worked? So Facebook is a terrible platform. It's a good platform for some things, as we've been discussing before we started this, the broadcast. But okay, Facebook is a terrible. Evie tells me that it's still terrible. Facebook is evil. They make you pay to grow a community, basically, and it is not good. So I use Twitter. I don't use Facebook. So trying to get big on YouTube hasn't worked for me, but having it as a repository for my my trailers and announcement videos and stuff has been good. So the gaming press is really interesting. So when I did client work for, or when I did a contract for Extraordinary and The Wind, the film companies that I was working with really wanted me to use my, I guess, my notoriety to contact like IGN and um, PC Gamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, and ask for reviews. And my response was, okay, I can do that, but the whole reason that we're making this game is to point it towards buying tickets to see our movie. Otherwise, it's not a promotional game. And so instead of contacting the gaming press, because I don't know about y'all, but I read gaming press headlines. I don't actually have the time or the patience to read gaming press articles, unless it's something really easy to read, like a listicle, like top 10 games that make you pee your pants. You know, I would love to be on a listicle like that. So I contacted the gaming press, and I don't like it didn't boost our numbers when it came time to launching these promo games, but sending the games to streamers and sending them to YouTubers did. And having short, digestible games that are able to be kind of processed by these uh, Twitch streamers and YouTubers was what helped. So there are some formats for gaming press and gaming press exposure that worked for me, and some that didn't. And then I went to a couple of cons and a few conferences. I spoke at GDC about Faith in a talk that's similar to this, and it really didn't do much besides that I met some fans and we got to talk and stuff. But other than it being a really cool experience and giving me like presentation practice, it really wasn't a big deal. So um, I need a break from presentation mode, so maybe I can answer some questions. What do y'all think?
Definitely. So we do have a few questions that have rolled through. So
Okay.
I guess just to kind of filter some of these out, do you want to talk much about chapter 3? Do you want to answer some questions about chapter 3, or do we want to leave that Leave that up
Yes,
for
I am
release.
transparent when it comes to chapter 3, but I'm not gonna like give away everything.
Fantastic. Let's see. Is Malphus making a return?
Yes, Malphus is in the chapter 3 demo and will be in the full game.
Awesome. Will there be a final battle between John and Gary in chapter 3?
Well, for one, Gary is a normal human being just like you and me. There's absolutely nothing to fear with Gary. Gary loves you. Two, it depends. Chapter 3 is all about Gary. I will say that. I will tell you that. You will see a lot more of him in the third chapter.
Ooh,
All right, what you got? What you got?
awesome. What is the
More
inspiration
questions.
behind the design for the demons?
Oh, okay. So the inspiration between the demons is a mix of like Junji Ito, um, traditional demonic imagery, goat faces and stuff. And then, but most of the times it's just me like throwing pixels into Photoshop, and if it looks kind of incomprehensible and freaky, then I keep it in. Um, I'm very loose when it comes to how the whole aesthetics of the demons, but they're mostly supposed to elicit that like, oh my god, what the f is that response that I really want to have in the games.
Yeah. So along those lines, when you were actually, uh, so I should be reading off the names of these. Angel Eyes, one of the individuals who's in the chat right now, as that's a lot of questions. So a lot of these are coming from them.
Okay, no
uh,
problem.
so I apologize if I missed a name on one of these. This one is from a Ruben. From Ruben. So was there any planning when it comes to the demons, or did you just grab whatever you had laying around and saw if it worked?
Okay, Ruben.
I
Yeah, so
love that question.
similar to yeah, and that's very much one that's a great question, and it's very similar to what they described. Most of the time, it's just me making a blob of pixels, and I make a couple of tweaks, but there's actually very little development involved. If I'm usually like intuitively, it usually comes to me pretty quickly when I'm designing like a new demon. But there are some sources like Junji Ito, like Lovecraft, stuff like PT and the Evil Within, stuff that really elicits that fear, that shock and fear response. That's usually what I go for.
Nice. So there's somebody, uh, Angel Eyes, mentioned that they were hoping that you would discuss the lore behind the trilogy. And maybe another follow up from Ruben is, do you have any idea of what the full story would be, or did you build over whatever foundation you had laid before? So just throwing both of those at you.
Yeah, so those are both good questions. So for lore, obviously there's a lot of inspiration from like Hollywood's interpretation of like spiritual warfare, so like The Exorcist. I watched Paranormal Activity 3 to get ready for chapter 2. I watched The Right. I think it has Andrew Hopkins in it. I watched The Conjuring. Conjuring is one of my all-time favorite horror films. I watched The Last Exorcism. That's a really important one. Um, very impactful on faith. And so yeah, like the lore was originally inspired by this priest's quest for redemption after after an exorcism went horribly wrong, and so he's trying to right his wrongs. Chapter 1, a lot of people talk about chapter 2 saying that they don't like that it's all a nightmare or that it's all in John's head. It kind of isn't. Like it's everything that happens in chapter 2 is real relative to the faith universe. It's just real in a different way, or it's made real in a different way, if you understand what I'm saying. And there's a few lore videos out there. There's one YouTuber that does them really well. um I forget who they are, but I recently retweeted one of their lore videos on my Twitter at Airdorf. Follow me, let's be friends. And they do a really good job. They're not 100% correct, but they do a very good job at like interpreting everything. And there are a few like faith explained or faith lore videos out there, so I'd recommend you start there. I always respond to them. I always respond to those videos and kind of give hints. But I will you'll be hard pressed to have me like actually explain the whole game. And as far as the structure of how I structured the story, I had a general idea of what I wanted to do, but there are parts of the story that I want to always leave ambiguous. I want to always keep you guessing and interpreting in the way that you want. An example is the whole morality behind the church aspect. So I happen to be a religious person, but I'm not Catholic. So I don't really believe in spiritual warfare as described with like The Exorcist and like having a priest come over and holding the crucifix and reading from the Ritual Romani or whatever it's called. That's not my personal belief, but it's something that's really compelling to me. And I've had both atheists and like devout religious people message me and say, "Hey, I really, for example, someone will email me and say, "Hey, as an atheist, I really appreciate how critical you are of organized religion and spirituality and kind of the dark side of religion in your game. So I thought that was really cool. So thanks for making it." I was like, "Oh, okay." And then I'll have a devout Catholic email me and say, "Hey, I really love Faith because it's the story of good overcoming evil, and casting away Satan, and what it means to be a good Catholic. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it." I'm like, "All right, hey, whatever you say." And so there are parts of the game that I want to leave open to interpretation because that's kind of the nature of spirituality for a lot of people, and I would never want to think that one portion of my player base is not cannot access this game because it is either dogmatic on the religious side or vehemently anti-religion on the other side. I want y'all to be able to make those interpretations for yourself. So there are parts of the game that I know the truth about, but I'm never going to let y'all know the truth about. But yeah, the story of Faith kind of evolved with each step. But there are elements of it that I always wanted to keep. Like Gary was always a figure in the game, and the sequence of events and what John is going through, um, that was always like a big part of it. And then there's a tiny, tiny bit that y'all inspire me to put into it, the game as far as lore goes, but I try not to let y'all take the reins that much. So I'm gonna hold a pause on questions and talk a little bit about New Blood. So they are my publisher. They approached me because I know the developer of Dusk from a Steam clan for Aliens versus Predator Classic 2000, which is like freaking awesome first-person shooter game. And so I knew him, and I wasn't there while he was developing Dusk, but he sent me a few alpha builds, and I sent him some feedback and stuff. And um, I got to know New Blood through him, and I had some conversations with Dave, and it was pretty interesting. So um, they pitched what they could do for me, and like I said, I wouldn't have gone with him if it wasn't like the best scenario that I could ask for right now. And so I've developed my brand further with them. Their one of their mottos is clear, consistent branding. So here's their kind of poster designs for their games. They do a lot of boomer shooters. They do like old, like kind of looking throwback games with like really cool twists, like Ultra Kill, where you like literally bathe in the blood of fallen enemies to like heal yourself, which is really cool. And Dusk, which has this like reality bending portion of the game, which you got to see to believe. And then there's Faith, which is like not a first person shooter, but they wanted me, I came, and so I'm really thankful to be working with them. And so their other motto is "We love you and we hate money." Um, they're very player centric, like developing a relationship with the player and developing a rapport with the customer is a big deal. And then they embrace memes, like they're not afraid to retweet memes or repost them and like embrace kind of the meme culture that surrounds A, their company, and B, like their products. And then Dave Oshry has his make somebody's day every day motto, which is something I've learned from a lot, like learning to not put up walls, um, with people. So one thing that I did, I made a decision early on Twitter, is to leave my DMs open always, no matter what. And it hasn't backfired on me yet. The reason why I did it was I think there was like a shooting incident that was related to some person who played a lot of games, and you know they were in a state to where I guess they felt like they needed to bring harm to themselves and others. And that really impacted me. And I thought to myself, like, I wonder if there are people that I know and people that play my games that are going through stuff, you know, and I wonder if I could be like one person to ask them how their day's going, tell them that things are going to be okay, or just talk to them. If I could be that person to them, then maybe it could help prevent a tragedy like that from happening. And so I keep my DMs open, and every time I post something like that, I usually get a good response. I usually get a few people who are like, "Hey, I'm going through this. Like, I could use someone to talk to." Um, some of them I have to refer to a professional who can help them better than I can, or tell them, talk to your parents, not me, because you are a minor and I'm not qualified to give you advice on any of this stuff. Like, if you're a 13-year-old, please don't ask me for relationship advice. I'm in my 30s. It's not appropriate. But I will be happy to say, hope you have a good day. So I try to make people's day by just being accessible, and I've had really good bug reports that way, and I've had really good interactions with fans that way. Of course, I get people who'd like spam me and harass me and stuff, and that's not cool, but they're relatively few. So just to end this slideshow, I really try to connect with and interact with players and fans. I try to limit spoilers as much as I can on Twitter, um, because it's very important in horror. Like, most of the time, you're only playing through a horror game once, and then that's it. It's spoiled for you. Embracing the fan content. So this is some fan art from Faith. We actually held a fan art contest at the beginning of the year last year, and it was really good. And having effective trailers that are, man, my webcam is looking awesome now. This is great. I have a very red background on my desktop that just popped up. So making effective trailers that are compelling is a big deal for me. I have a background in visual arts and animation and stuff, so that helps. Uh, Getting feedback from New Blood also helps. And then embracing Mortis. I got the shirt right here. Oh, you can't see it. Um, but embracing that meme, and kind of embracing kind of the silly, like, repostable parts of the game. And sometimes people post faith memes that are like super cringe, but I repost them because I love you guys, and I'm just like super touched that like people care about the games that I've created in the way that they do. It really means a lot to me that I've created something that scares and entertains people. So, in the interest of time, thank you for coming to my TED Talk, and thank you for sticking around for this post-mortis. And as predicted, I went over time, so sorry, IGDA Des Moines chapter. Do we have time for some more questions? I can stick around for like just a little bit before we have to put the baby up.
Let's what I'm gonna do is throw a couple questions out to you.
I'm
We're
going to go
going
back to a
to
more red slide. There we go, so that y'all can see me better.
the beauty.
Yeah.
Yeah, let me throw a couple questions out there. Um, one question that came up a couple times. Uh, who's your favorite demon?
My favorite demon, I really like Peekaboo. That I call them that. They're the ones with the hands over the face. I like I like their mechanic a lot, and I like that they kind of make a comeback in the chapter 3 demo. I also really like Michael Davies, the little spider boy who runs around the woods. There's a there's a there's like a whole fan base for him. He's like a fan favorite, and I really like Miriam Bell. I like the demon nun.
Oh, that's awesome. Yeah. And then the last question actually came from EB. So I apologize that the question I had just asked you, there were a few people who had asked that, so I'm not going
Yeah,
to list the
sure.
names off. But that's a fun one. So the last one kind of gets on to what you were doing at the time when you were making your game, and more or less, how did you balance work and life while developing it? So how did you balance being productive and actually getting the work done?
Yeah. Well, one, I have a partner who is very supportive of my dreams of scaring the crap out of people with pixelated demons. Um, we actually got really lucky this year. So she was really interested in the Conjuring horror films, and she's usually not interested in horror films. So we've been like watching all the like the Annabelle and the Conjuring films, and it's been really great. Normally she is like not into my games at all, but she's been very supportive. I kind of told her about my dream of being a game developer. Um, maybe a couple years after we first got married, and she's been really supportive. And having someone like that, especially now that we have a child together, you know, I have a day job and I'm also doing some other stuff with my life to kind of, eventually be able to provide because faith does not pay the bills. it it pays for it on a bad week. It pays for a nice date night every week. On a good week, it pays for like a really nice date night every week. So we save up, Other than that, she works, I work. So yeah, like the schedule can get pretty crazy. There's been times in the past 3 years when I've been able to dedicate 8 hours a day to faith. There's been times when I can barely write a couple lines of code before I have to do something else. And part of that is some of that is really frustrating, but it's just about priorities. Um, Typically, I will work on faith in the wee hours of like 4 a.m. to like 7 a.m. when the baby wakes up. Sometimes I get a couple of hours during the day when I'm not, doing my other hustles, I guess. And it's been slow going, so I have to be patient with myself. But um, it also gives me a lot of time to kind of reflect on what I'm making. So that I'll make a scene and I'll play through it and I'll send it to New Blood and I'll get some feedback and then I'll think about it for a couple of days and it really helps me kind of figure out what I want to do with it. So I really don't have any like technique for for managing my work life balance. It's just you got to find the time when you can. I'm actually really jealous sometimes of indie devs who just forsake everything and jump right into it, and do it full time. Unfortunately, like not everyone can make a living off of it, which is kind of something that I have to do now that I have a family, And so, um, thankfully, my publisher has been very patient with me. Thankfully, like the Faith like fandom and like followers have been really patient with me. Faith Chapter 3 is being worked on like basically every day. It's just little by little. And so it's really you just got to take the time when you can, like a lot of energy drinks. I go to the gym so that I, stay in shape. I don't drink, I don't do drugs. Like I try to take care of myself and get enough sleep, but um so thankfully I've had the energy to kind of work on it all these years, but um it'll happen. It's just it's not happening as quickly as I'd like it to be, but there's also some things going on in my life that are huge blessings. Like having a kid just changes everything, and it's been such a wild ride, but very worth it. Like having a baby, and it's something that I never thought I could do, or like being a father was like something I was really afraid of for a while, but it's really cool. So I will always be able to work on these games. It's just like there are times when I have to dedicate more energy and time to other things. So hopefully that answers your question.
Well, that was awesome. Well, we really appreciate everything tonight. For anybody else who wants to continue the conversation, Airdorf, if you're interested, of course, we do have the Slack channel. Just post stuff out in the general, and as you get time, just give us some answers. It sounds like we've got some fans hanging out in here, people who making memes. Looks like someone swapped Garcia's cross with a rat in a meme just for
Hey,
fun.
I love a good rat meme. I will always be down for a rat meme.
So yeah, so for anybody who wants to join, get some additional questions in, yeah, check out the description, join our Slack channel, take a look at us on Facebook. We posted the link, I believe, to your Twitch channel as well. So go take a look at Airdorf. Go try out Faith if you haven't tried it out. I'm going to be trying it out here pretty soon. Got some friends lined up so we can get right through it.
Yeah,
So
great.
Yeah. So any parting words? Any advice you'd like to give? Or
Oh, for indie game devs, yeah. Like don't quit your day job if you have one. um, yeah, just I'm a big fan of just starting simple and small and just seeing what happens with it. Don't burn yourself out trying to make the next Skyrim or whatever. Look at the trends and see if you can make something that either disrupts those trends or you can use those trends to your advantage. And if you need coding advice, learning how to Google coding solutions is more, and like learning what to ask is very valuable because then you'll find the answers yourself. All of my coding is like Brian, you would hate it. Like I work in Unity, and all of the stuff, all of my Unity scripts are just like endless if-then statements and like these like ridiculous state machines that are like 4,000 lines of code. Oh, the boss battle for the Miriam Bell boss battle, the nun boss battle in chapter 2, it's like 2,000 lines of code to do just to do the AI for her boss battle, and it's not even like that impressive because like
I heard nothing.
I do not know how to properly code.
Well, if you need some help, we've got people.
Oh, did my audio cut out just now?
Nope.
Oh, okay. Because you said I heard nothing, so I was like, oh no.
No, just joking.
Okay. Yeah. So like
Hear
my
no
coding
evil.
skills are shameful, but I make it work, and I use easy to use platforms like I use engines like GameMaker that do all the heavy lifting for you.
Oh, fun. Well, if you
Cool.
need
Well,
any
thank you
help,
so much for having me, y'all.
yeah,
I could talk. I love to talk, and thanks to the pandemic, like I have almost zero interaction with human beings. So I love talking to people.
oh
So
yes,
I will be on Slack. I'm already on Slack. I introduced myself on it, and I'd be happy to hang around the Slack for a little while and answer any questions. And then just DM me or email me or whatever. I don't care.
definitely. Well, yes, thank you for joining us, and everybody who's here, thanks for joining us as well. So have a great night.
Have a good night. Gary loves you. Never forget.